We're going to start with sort of what are efforts. Basically, efforts are ways of taking a national, potentially international issue and breaking it down into a bunch of local campaigns. So if you're asking for a national government to do something, but instead of having one petition, you want to petition every member of parliament, every member of a cabinet, every CEO of a company that is a problem in this area, if you wanted to target every university or every mayor, it's a way of sort of saying, we have this set of campaigns that we want to run. There is a national issue, but we want to have a lot of really small local petitions run by local people targeting local decision makers. And so basically, within the efforts feature, staff members, admins can say, here's the basic idea, and then allow the members to take the lead in these campaigns. So each local campaign has its own local target, it has its own local leader, it has its own mailing list, it can function as its own campaign, so it can use the tactics that make sense for that local campaign. It can win on its own, but then it all contributes to this broader national campaign, hopefully moving the country on an issue or potentially helping with an international issue if that's the level at which the effort is operating. This is not an overly pretty slide, but I wanted to sort of make clear that there's a lot of variations in what these efforts look like. Pretty much most efforts that are created are set up a little bit differently, and they have different, basically different variations on sort of certain specific parts of the effort. So the first one being the local targets themselves. There's a big difference on how those local targets are chosen. So they can be completely from the minds of your members. I want to take this campaign to my local store. I want to take it to my university. We don't have a list of all the universities that it could potentially be run at. So we're going to rely on our members to say, my university also needs to have this campaign. On the other end of the spectrum, they can be completely chosen by admins. So I used MPs as an example here. If you're running a campaign targeting MPs, you know who all of the members of parliament are. You don't need your members to add them to the effort. You already have them. You probably have a list of them somewhere. So you can basically upload all of those members of parliament and say, this is who we're targeting. These are the only people we're targeting. We don't need members to help contribute to a list of targets. And then you can have something that's somewhere in the middle. So I use mayors and CEOs as this example, where you might have a list of mayors of maybe the 20 largest cities in your country, and you definitely want to target those mayors. But then you also want to allow a member who's living in a tiny village with 100 people to also be able to take this campaign to their village. That village may or may not land on your list because it's such a small village, but it's something where you can say, we definitely want to target these folks, but if you want to target other people, you can also add your own targets. Similarly, there's a spectrum for petition text. It can be completely pre-written by admins. All of the demands are the same. All of the reasons why it's important are the same. Everything is preset and cannot be changed. Or it can be completely left up to members to tell the story of why this campaign is important and what they actually want their decision maker to do. Or it can be somewhere in the middle, which is usually the way efforts are set up, which is admins suggest some text, but members can potentially update the text for their local campaign as they take ownership of it. The other sort of axes, and I promise this is the last one that has these sort of silly arrow spectrums on it. But basically, local campaigns, once they're created in the effort, they can be member-led, and we encourage you to usually incorporate your members and ask them to lead the campaigns. It is also possible to not recruit leaders at all and to have it completely run by admins and just ask supporters to sign their closest local campaign, or it can be a mix of the two. So if you have high-value targets that you definitely want to campaign against and you can't find a good leader for them, you could continue to run those campaigns in-house while also allowing for other petitions to be run by members. And then the last one here, these are just a little bit different because it's either one or the other. So you can either have one petition per target, so each mayor gets only one campaign, or you can say as many people as want to create this petition targeting this mayor can. So maybe we're going to have 5 petitions. We'll sort of see who ends up being the best campaigner, and they'll be the one that we choose as the winner at some point during the effort and say, you are now the winner, you're targeting this mayor. But you can allow a bunch of people to try and start campaigns to see how far they get. And then efforts can also be either location-based or keyword only. This is, I put them on the same arrow, so I didn't have to add a third slide of arrows. It's not as if one petition per target means that they're location-based or that many petitions per target means that they must be keyword. It's just that they're both one or the other type of options. Most of the efforts are location-based, so people can search to find the closest campaign to them. Keyword search can be useful for some efforts. So ones that often end up being keyword searches are employer type of campaigns, where you're asking employees to find their employer and sign on to a campaign asking their company to do something, especially for large employers. If you're targeting Google and Amazon and other folks that have employees all around the world, it makes more sense to use a keyword there versus having someone enter their specific location. Okay, so questions on these slides at all? No, okay, so I think it's useful to actually look at some of these in person. So I'm going to show a couple, including, because I assumed that Greenpeace Belgium would have someone on the call, we're just gonna briefly show this one as well. So I'm gonna show two from Greenpeace, both of whom there are folks on the call, and then two from outside of Greenpeace as well. So the first one here, this is Greenpeace Belgium's former effort from before they decided to pre-launch the campaign or pre-launch the site. I don't speak Dutch, but this is, as I understand it from Greenpeace Belgium and also from Google Translate, is basically there were elections and it was asking the candidates who were running and the parties that were running them to agree to clean air provisions. So people could come to this page, they could search for their location to find their closest campaign. I also just really love this image with the mask. It's quite funny and also feels timely given where we all are now. So yeah, people can come in, they can find their campaign. Presumably this is a local leader, and people who are running in a specific district would see, this number of people who are potential voters in my area care about this issue, and hopefully move them in the direction that you wanted to move them. That's one. The other one is this one from Greenpeace France, which was around less meat and dairy, more greenery and vegetables and fruits in local canteens, cafeterias. Again, people could search their location to find their closest campaign, of which there were a bunch. And they could then sign on to ask their local cafeteria to become more green. As I recall for this one, there were some existing targets that GP France knew they wanted to definitely campaign against. And then it was also open-ended to allow people to say, I want to bring this to my cafeteria as well, or I want to bring this to my school, and ask them to also have a sort of less meat in their cafeteria. Okay, so the other two that I chose, so these are the two Greenpeace ones that I think are sort of useful in placing what this usually looks like. The next two I wanted to show specifically because I think they're sort of two ends of a bunch of the spectrums we just talked about. So I think it can be useful, excuse me, to sort of show both sides. So this first one here, this is the Go Fossil Free campaign run by 350.org. It targets colleges and universities. This, what I would say is one of the most open versions of this type of campaign. So anyone can come here and create a petition targeting their college or university. It's been many years, but as I recall, they did not start with a list of colleges and universities that they definitely wanted to target. It was entirely added by members. So there's all of the petitions are member generated. For this campaign, there's no limit on the number of petitions that can target a specific university. So I can set up another one also targeting University of New Mexico if I want to, also run this campaign and I don't think the current leader is doing a very good job. It's also completely up to me to write whatever I want to. So there's some text that's available, but I can completely change it to say whatever I want it to say. Obviously, the Go Fossil Free team can moderate it and say this is inappropriate, it can't be on the site. But I have a lot of flexibility on who I'm targeting, what I'm saying, and how many petitions are actually targeted at a university. So this is sort of the most open-ended version. And again, it has the same features that we just talked about, which is like, I can come in here, I can search for my location to find my closest university. It has a local target, a local leader, I can sign it. And presumably the other people signing it would also be members of the local campus. On the, this is not actually on the page I wanted it to be on. On the other end of the spectrum is this one, which is probably the most closed one of these efforts that we have seen recently. So for this one, this was also similar to my understanding of Green Peace Belgium's campaign. This was also an election type campaign asking candidates for MP to commit to NHS funding in the UK. So they knew exactly how many members of parliament there were. There was one target pre-chosen for each district. These were all set up by admins. They did not ask for members to create their own targets. If we search for one of these, you'll see that they also did not actually recruit local leaders. So the staff at 38 Degrees, they were the ones who were running this. There's no local leader on these campaigns. They sort of coordinated the in-person deliveries of all of these signatures in-house. And all of the text for these is exactly the same. So the what are we asking them to do? Completely the same for all campaigns. Why is this important? Completely the same for all campaigns. So it's, like I said, probably the most closed version of this effort where members are basically just being asked to sign and the rest is already decided by admins before the effort is launched. Okay, any questions so far? No? Okay. So we've sort of looked at this from, the front page without really getting too deep into it. So I wanted to go through sort of what supporters see when they're interacting with these before we actually go to set one up. That way, when I'm talking about, let's choose decision makers, or this is where you can customize text or whatever, you'll actually have an example of what this really looks like. So this is a staging site that we use. So this is an entirely fake campaign. We had a list of some number of mayors from somewhere. So it uses mayors that I think at this point, a bunch of them are no longer in office. So it's not great data on our staging site, but hopefully you'll all go with me anyway. And so basically, if this were a live campaign, as a supporter of this organization, so as someone who didn't have admin privileges, I could come in, I can search for a location to find my closest campaign. So this is my closest campaign. Here are some other campaigns that I might also be interested in that are happening nearby. And from here is sort of my first decision point as a supporter, is whether I just want to sign this campaign or if I want to get more involved. So if I don't feel like I want to lead this campaign, I don't have the time or the energy, I can say, I just want to sign it and be done with it. This petition already exists, even though it doesn't have a local leader. So I can just sign it the way I would sign any other petition, and basically not get more involved if I don't want to get more involved. The other option I have is to actually become the leader of this campaign. So this is something that I think makes efforts an interesting tool to use, is that you can recruit supporters to become leaders of campaigns that you're helping write. So let's say that you knew you wanted to target J. Michael Houston of Springfield, Illinois, but you don't know anyone in Springfield who necessarily would be a great leader. If you did know someone, you could make them the leader before you actually launch this and say, we're going to assign you to the Springfield campaign. We know you're going to do great. We're not even going to ask other people to volunteer because you're the best choice. If that's not the case, you can say, we're going to wait to see who volunteers. And so this is sort of the recruitment process. As someone who's potentially being recruited, I can get some information about what you want me to do. And this can be customized to the effort. So it can include really specific asks. Maybe you want them to be available for a conference call where you talk about the strategy and how they're playing a role in the broader campaign. Maybe you want them to have an in-person delivery to their mayor. I assume this is a mayor. You can sort of set up whatever it is that you're going to ask them to do.
Christine.
Yeah.
On this, is this customized message per effort supporting HTML or markup? Can people put other stuff, or is just text?
As far as I remember, it also supports HTML, so you can also have like links out or do other things.
Thank you. There is also a little question from Elodie.
Sure.
Do you want to go ahead? Okay, go.
No, I'm not sure it's, I just worded well. It just, I wanted to understand the added value of doing that. Is it proven that if we, if an organization like Greenpeace wrote some petitions and put this I'll be a leader button, it will increase the number of active engagements? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
No, it does make sense. Yeah. So I think that there's a couple of things. So the first one is the idea that you're asking people to get more involved. So maybe they haven't been involved before, and this is a way to identify that they might be interested in taking on additional responsibilities, helping the campaigns that you're running outside of this platform as well. So it's partially a way to just identify who might be someone you can call on in the future. I think it's also useful for instances where the office just doesn't have time to do all of these campaigns. So you're calling on people to basically take some of the campaigning work that would normally be done by staff and to do it on their own. That said, like, there will be good leaders and there will be bad leaders. Some people who volunteer will volunteer and then never do anything with the petition. You might have to remove them or, change shoes of a leader, or they might be well-intentioned but not actually very good campaigners. So it's something that choosing a local leader doesn't mean that the campaign will necessarily win or that it will necessarily be more successful than if you were running it in-house. But I think it's a way of identifying those leaders, giving them tools so that they can hopefully win this campaign and potentially also, figure out how to campaign on the issues that they care about that maybe this national office definitely doesn't have time to work on. And I think it's also something where the I'll be a leader doesn't mean that at that point, the staff at the NRO just completely aren't doing anything with this petition anymore. Usually the most successful of these efforts, they're still talking to the campaign leader, they're still providing tips and encouragement, maybe not one-on-one, maybe you're sending a giant reminder email to everyone who's agreed to lead one of these campaigns, but you're still coaching them through the process and helping them hopefully be successful. And in doing that, hopefully activating them to be more involved in the other work that GP is doing, and also making them feel like I can actually lead a campaign and I can be successful, and maybe I want to do this again on some other issue. Yeah, so I would say hopefully that answers it. Does that answer?
Is GP at the origin of the campaign, or is it like someone who just led this campaign and then is looking for somebody more to help him?
So this type of campaign would be set up by the Greenpeace team. So they would set up that, we're doing this ban fracking thing. They would say, potentially, we definitely want to target these set of people. As we go through it, you'll see other places where, the Greenpeace team is writing what they'll need to do and writing the text of the petition, as you'll see in a second. So it's very directed initially by the Greenpeace team, and then the leaders are hopefully going to sort of take ownership of these petitions. They're going to do the things that make sense for their campaign. So if I'm, campaigning in my local town, I might know that if I want, a really good support of this, I have to go to the local farmers market on Saturday and get those signatures, which is something that Greenpeace National Office might not know. I might know that, like, in my town, you have to get, Jane Smith on board or else nothing is going to happen at the council level. And so I can sort of be the person on the ground who's doing this work. But a lot of the initial setup is definitely done by the Greenpeace office. And then they're also coaching throughout the life of the campaign or doing encouragement type steps.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Christine, sorry, I'm just going to jump in quickly. Peter is asking if there is always one leader or can be multiple in some way. I guess that the whole point of distributed effort is that as many as they are, the better. That's... Yeah,
so in this screen, there's usually only one. So one person can click the I'll be a leader button, but if you have multiple people who want to be leaders and you still only want one petition per target, You can add them as secondary leaders. As someone who is leading one of these campaigns, I can then give access to other people who maybe are interested. We've actually seen this this is something that some organizations do with this type of campaign, is on the signature form, have a special checkbox that says, I want to, be more involved, or, phrases it in some way of, I want to become like someone who's helping lead this campaign. And then they'll give them access to the petition creator tools as well. So, and then I guess the other side of this would be, if you're accepting multiple targets per leader, then you can basically have, 70 people targeting J. Michael Houston if you wanted to, and then see sort of who's the best campaigner basically, or just let them all run their campaign independently. Any other questions? No? Okay, so let's say again that I'm thinking about becoming a leader of this campaign. I've read the quick version of what I need to do and it all sounds good. I can click to become the leader and I get some additional encouragement. This is default text, you can change it. Usually this is, encouragement, and also we're not going to push you out into the water on your own. Like, we're going to help you. Don't be scared. It's all going to be great, is usually what this step is. At this point, I can commit as the leader, and because this petition is already written, and because of the way it is set up in the settings, I don't have to edit the text at all. I can then get some more detailed information about what I need to do as a leader. So if you have a specific date that I need to join the conference call that maybe I was warned about in the first step, if you have details or tips on how I do that in-person delivery that I was told I would need to do, if you want to provide contact information, so like if I get into trouble, I know that I can talk to Luca and he can help me. You can provide any of that information on this page so that your campaign leader feels like they're still part of this broader national effort. They're not sort of on their own. They're part of a campaign and a full strategy, and that they're also important to the strategy, that they have to do their work or else the strategy isn't going to work. I think that making that clear is also really useful on this page. At this point, I can say that I'm ready, and I am now technically the campaign leader of this campaign. So I didn't have to write any of this information. It was all pre-written for me, but I'm still listed as the campaign leader. I can contact my supporters. I can do all of the other things that a petition creator can normally do. And that contacting supporters would include people who signed before there was a leader of this campaign. So I'm now sort of the contact person for this petition that was created by staff members, even though I am now the leader. The only thing that's a little bit different on the petition creator tools for an effort campaign is this training option here. So this basically lets me look back on the things that I previously learned I was going to need to do. So this is the same content as was on the final page we looked at, where I got details about the conference call and tips for the delivery and found out that Luca can help me if I need help. So this is where I can look back and see that information again. Any questions on that part of the flow? No? Okay, so
sure. Elodie is asking if the new leader can change the text.
Yeah, so that's an option that you can configure within the effort. So there's a couple of options here. One is that when someone takes over leadership of the campaign, you can have an optional page where they are shown the text and asked to review it or edit it. That didn't happen for this effort, but it's something that you can do during the setup process. They can also edit the content from their normal edit content tab of the petition creator tools. And you can decide what they can edit. So for this one, we've locked the why is this important. So as a petition creator, I cannot edit the text, but I can edit the what do I want them to do. Usually those two are flipped. Usually it's like, these are a set of demands that we're saying for everyone. You can't change these, but you can tell your own story of why it's important. However, this one has markup, and so I left it the way it was, which as a flag is another thing that's a little bit different about efforts. It's not super visible, at least on my screen, but in efforts, if you have locked the fields, you can have markup. So like this is technically in bold, although with our font, you can't really tell that it's in bold. So that's something that we don't normally allow for regular petitions. Any other questions? No? Okay, so I want to take through one other quick version of this. And at this point, I'm going to give a little bit of a warning. So we are going to set one of these up. If there's anyone at an NRO who's thinking through thinking through maybe running one of these campaigns, if you wanted to share the use case you're thinking of, we could set one up that's sort of tied to whatever use case you're planning. Otherwise, we can just set one up from my mind. But if it's something where you have targets in mind, let me know and we can do that. Okay, so I wanted to show the other version of this supporter journey, which is if I search for a location and there is not actually a petition near me. So in honor of our host, Luca, let's say that I search for Milan and there is not a petition near me. I can be prompted to become the leader of this campaign. So there was no, Milanese mayor in our list of US mayors, unsurprisingly. And so we can come in and we can say that I want to be a leader. I get told the same sort of encouragement type email texts, but at this point I can actually add in the mayor's name. So we're going to pretend, you are actually based in Milan, right, Luca? I didn't make that up?
Yes, there is a massive thunderstorm, yes.
Okay, good. So we are going to make Luca the mayor of Milan. And he is going to hopefully ban fracking for us. So I can add this in. I can then go through and review the text that's been written. So it's adding, Luca's name in, it's adding the location of Milan in, and then I can go through and create this campaign. At this point, I review the petition the way I would if I were creating my own petition, like wholly on my own, unrelated to an effort. I get the same training page that anyone else would get when they're creating or leading one of these petitions. So I'm still getting told about the phone call and the delivery, and that I can reach out to Luca for help, although now he's the mayor, so that fake workflow is a little bit less clear. And at this point, this campaign has launched. This is now part of this broader, now international effort. It's still its own petition with its own mailing list and its own tools, but it's part of this broader effort. And once it's reviewed by admins and approved, so either moderated to good or awesome, it'll actually be added to the search results so that other people in Milan can then search and find this petition as well. So this is sort of the spectrum of completely admin chosen targets, completely open-ended targets. This petition is in the middle of, we have some targets that were chosen by admins, but we're also allowing people to add their own. And so this is the add their own step of that process. Okay, so any questions on supported journeys? No? Great. So we're gonna set one of these up. If anyone on the call does have an idea for an effort that they want to use, we can do that, or I can go with my own. The commit to clean air came from Brazil last night for an upcoming election. That was their idea. It still used US mayors because we have limited target collections on our demo site, but the idea came from them, not to do any sort of, competition between these two calls, but someone did propose an idea on the other call. All right, I'm gonna give it 3 seconds in case anyone has one they want to see. No? Okay. So here's the plan of what we're gonna do. This is one that I actually sort of stole from Greenpeace New Zealand, and we happen to have New Zealand councils as a target set on this particular site, so it seems like it made sense. So the idea for this effort that we're about to set up is that we're gonna ask the local councils in New Zealand to ban single-use plastic bags. Technically, New Zealand has already done this. So this campaign we've already won, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure that happened last year. But we'll pretend that it hasn't and that we are the ones who are going to make that change happen. So to get started on doing this, you would go to your efforts page here, click new effort, and then you get brought to this page. This page is basically used to make you, or to help you think about ways that the tool has been used in the past, and some different sort of organizing use cases that you could choose to use efforts for. It doesn't actually matter what you pick at this point. It doesn't make any difference. This is really just laying out things that people have done in the past. Okay, so at this point, we're asked to choose a title. My big warning on this is that if you're setting one of these up, the title is used also for the URL. So if you're just not sure what the title should be yet, stop, do not proceed, or choose something that is like broadly applicable. So if you're doing like a clean air campaign and you're not entirely sure what the actual title you want to be on the page is, use clean air, the URL will still work, but do not use test if you want this to be your live one, because it will say test forever and for always. All right, so let's say we're doing Bandabag. So I can add this in. I've used this before. We're going to number 3, but it's fine. At this point, I get asked to choose between decision makers or campaign objectives. This is something that, as ControlShift staff talking amongst ourselves, we sometimes cannot describe well to each other despite having built this feature and actually knowing what we mean. So I'm giving that as a warning before I try to describe the difference to all of you. It's very hazy. So the first one, decision makers, this is almost always what you're going to want to choose for one of these efforts. It means that you know who's in charge of making the changes for you. You have really specific ideas on what changes need to be made and the people in charge of those changes. Objectives is when you don't have that much information. So the only real version of this is the rename Confederate monuments example here. I don't even remember what the fake use case we had for IKEA products was. We didn't have another example, and I think Nathan came up with that, and I don't remember the details. But the Confederate monuments one was basically in the US, there are a bunch of monuments named after, you know, slaveholding generals. It's very strange and awful. And so an organization ran a campaign to basically take down all of the monuments, rename all of the schools named after Confederate generals, rename all the roads named after those generals, etc. The problem being that who's in charge of taking down a statue can vary a lot. It could be the mayor, it could be the governor, it could be, you know, the local daughters of the Confederacy who own the statue. It could be some random organization on whose property the Confederate statue sits. And for like renaming a school, it could again be mayor, it could be Board of Education, it could be city council. Like there's just no way of knowing who's in charge of renaming or removing a specific monument or school or whatever. So Color Change had a list of a bunch of, I think hopefully all of these monuments across the country, all of the schools that were named for Confederates across the country. And so they basically uploaded that list of the things that needed to change, but they didn't know who was going to be the people in charge of making that change happen. So members who wanted to support this campaign could search for their location to say, like, this is my closest monument. This monument is the one that's in my town. Then that supporter would need to do a little bit of research on their own of who's in charge of actually removing this monument. And so it wasn't a decision maker campaign, it was initially objectives first. So we want to do this thing, but there's going to be work to figure out how it all is going to happen in the future, and that's up to you, dear supporter. Did you have a question, Luca? I saw you on mute for a second. Oh, you're typing. Okay. So generally speaking, the long-winded version of this is that you almost always want to choose decision makers. And if you don't think that it quite fits, maybe hop on a call with me and we can talk through it and figure out what makes sense. Okay. So at this point, you get asked about the decision maker types. So do you know who they all are? Do you know who some of them are? Do you not know who any of them are? This is basically the first spectrum I showed you in the slide was, you know, we know who all of them are because they're members of Congress, they're members of Parliament, there's a finite list and we know who they are. Or the decision makers, there's a lot of them. There are a ton of mayors, there are a ton of stores, there are too many for us to have a full list of, but we know some that are going to be important to this campaign. Or there are just way too many. There's, you know, cities around the world, all of the colleges in the world, or, you know, every single store. We don't know who they all are. We don't have a list of them. We're just going to rely on members to actually create them. For the purposes of this, I'm going to choose this one. It doesn't entirely line up with the set of data we have, but I think it's sort of the most useful for the terms of, for the sort of example that we're setting up. So I'm going to choose, we know some, but not all. Go ahead, Luca.
Oh, there was a nice question by Julia. If anyone can choose, like, can see, I want to be a leader option if they are not logged in. And if they are not, what happens when they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyone can see it even if they're not logged in. I'm just logged in because it's a little bit easier. That way when I switch over to admin things, I don't have to relog in. But anyone can see this. So if I search, I don't know off the top of my head which ones, let's see. Okay, so as someone who's not currently, oh, actually I'm still logged in. Hang on, let me truly not log in. So as someone who is not logged in, if I search, that was, nope. I can still see this, I'll be a leader. I can go through the same steps as I normally would. It's just that I would be asked to either log in or create an account at this point, and then I would see the training page be launched as the leader, etc. Yeah, any other questions? Okay. So for this decision maker, we're going to choose that we know some of them, we don't know all of them. So it's basically, we're going to start with a list, but we're going to allow people to add their own if there are other places we should take this campaign. Okay, so at this point, I get asked to add these decision makers. If you are doing an effort and it only has like, I would say the limit being around 3 for me because I don't like doing busy work all that much. If I had 3 decision makers, I might just individually create them. So name, location, other information that I might want to check. After about 3, I would become annoyed at manually entering this, and I would want to just upload a CSV. Ooh, sorry, I'm not seeing that work. I would want to upload a CSV of all of these decision makers. So if you're running one of these efforts and you do have a list in a CSV form or something like that, we can upload them for you so that you don't have to manually enter each decision maker. So for this example, we have a list of the local councils in New Zealand. We're just going to add them all. It's also possible to add multiple collections. So let's say you're doing mayors and also CEOs for some reason, and you have 2 lists. You can upload both of those collections. You can also say most of our targets are in this collection that we have, but we also want to add in, you know, another target that's sort of a one-off. We'll say they're in these. It's up to you to set this up, but if you need help uploading the targets, just let us know and we'll upload them for you, and then they'll show in this list of decision maker collections. Okay, so at this point I get asked if I want to add template content. So this is basically, do I want to provide text for supporters who are leading this campaign so that they don't need to write it entirely on their own? It's optional and you don't have to provide text, but I would encourage you almost always to provide at least some text to make it a little bit easier for someone who's starting one of these campaigns, with the idea that they've sort of been told that they're like, you know, helping admins and they've seen targets that you've added, and then they get to a page where there's no text. They might be like, but I thought you were helping me here. Now I feel like it's all up to me. So at least giving them a suggestion is usually useful. You can do certain customizations. So for example, you can see this target name variable will let you say, you know, target name and the bag. You can again add these variables to the, you know, default what content, including like the location name as well. So this is sort of how the other one was set up when we added Luca as a target and it said Luca in Milan. It's basically set up this way. I don't have text, so we're just going to do this. Okay. So at this point, you get sort of a preview of what this looks like, where we just pick a random target from your list. We sort of show you what it would look like for that target's petition. You can then say, oh, we need to edit, or this looks fine. And then click next. At this point, you get asked if you want to create these petitions in the background. My general encouragement is if you have targets that are like less than around 300, you may just want to create all of these petitions in the background. That means that you don't need a leader before people can start signing. So if I search for my location, I'm not ready to be the leader on my own. I'm still able to sign the petition, even if there's not a local leader yet. Above around 300, it sort of becomes, wow, we have a ton of petitions that don't have leaders. If there's not a leader, they're probably not going to get a ton of signatures in the background. Maybe we don't want them all clogging up the site. We'll just wait for someone to claim their local campaign and then have them actually launch the petition themselves. It's up to you. For this one, I'm going to pre-create these petitions. And then the final step of this wizard is basically asking, it's sort of double checking that we think we know what you want, and then you can decide if it's not actually what you want. So based on the options I chose, which were that we had some but not all targets, it's saying, confirming that I do want to allow people to add their own decision makers, which I do. And then because I've pre-created text, it's double checking, do I actually want people to become leaders of the existing petitions? And I do. So if that all looks good, I can click next. And at this point, the effort is live. So people can start coming in here. Let me switch over to the other view of this. People can start coming in. They can start searching for their targets. This looks a little bit strange. I shouldn't have used the US because it makes the map look really ridiculous. People can see that there are a bunch of campaigns in New Zealand. They can start searching for their closest campaign and start running the campaign. So the petitions are probably at this point still being created in the background, which is why it says 0 campaigns and 0 petitions created currently. But they're being created in the background as we go. Okay, so like I said, you could launch this at this point. You probably would not want to because there are some things that would be potentially confusing for members. First of all, there's no description of what is actually happening if they land on this page. It's completely unclear. It says ban the bag. I don't know what it's going on. Why am I here? What do you want me to do? What is the point? This one's a little better. There's a map and there's sort of default how this works, but it's all very generic. Again, not entirely clear why I'm here or what is actually happening. So there are definitely some customizations you would probably want to make. And a lot of these customizations are in either the settings page here or the leadership page here. So in settings, you can add something like the landing page welcome text that describes what's going on, or the description of this effort that also describes why someone is on this page and what you're asking them to do. Within efforts, we also allow customization of all of the emails that are sent, both to creators and to signers. So instead of getting sort of the default thank you for creating email, you can get one that's really specific to this effort that says, thank you for creating a ban the bag petition. Here's our plan for ban the bag. Here are the things you need to know. Here are the next steps for this specific campaign. And similarly for signers, you can also do sort of deeper customizations of the type of communications they're getting about this petition.
Christine,
and then, yeah, go ahead.
Elodie is asking if we can see some sort of a draft without necessarily publishing the effort, if there is a preview mode or something.
So there, of the actual effort itself, there isn't a draft state, but the effort won't be publicly visible until you send someone to it. So like this ban the bag doesn't show up on the homepage, for example. It is true if you pre-create the petitions that the petitions themselves will show up once they're created in this featured campaign section, but you can also reduce their moderation status to approved, which would hide the petitions themselves if you wanted to sort of hold the effort before you make it live. So the only thing that would potentially be visible are the petitions. You can update their status in bulk, so you don't have to go petition by petition, changing the status. And then the actual effort page itself is not really visible unless you share the link with your members. Okay, so the other big section of customizations is this training page, this leadership settings page where you can customize all of the training text we talked about, give the specific information for the conference call, the delivery, the contact Luca for help, add all of that in. There are also various settings that you can choose. So the one question we got about whether campaign leaders can edit the text. This is something where you can prompt them as they go through the process of becoming the leader to actually edit the text. That's an option here. And then there are also customizations you can do to the form for a new petition. So instead of the default, who are you petitioning, who has the power to give you what you want, that's used on your main petition creation form, you can customize it to say, who is your mayor in charge of banning bags or whatever, and then have specific help text for this effort. It's also possible to customize the decision maker form. So if instead of saying, who is your decision maker, you want to say, who is your mayor, you can customize it so that, again, people are given as much information as they go to set one of these up as possible. Okay, I want to talk about a couple of other things around efforts, just flagging them as things that sometimes cause people confusion and trouble. So the first one is that petitions created in the effort still require moderation. So this is the one that I created that was not a target that had already been identified. It was a new target and a new petition. It does still require me to do moderation. So I can still review it. I can still make edits to it if there's something that's incorrect that needs to be changed. The big thing that's different for petitions in an effort is this decision maker field here. You can see this is unpublished with a big publish button. You must hit to publish if you want this to be fully searchable by supporters. So if your decision maker is not published, even if you make your campaign publicly visible and searchable, search does not work correctly. So you really want to make sure that all of the petitions in your effort have published decision makers. And we do show this here. Having just done that, I realize that this is actually not going to, there we go. So like this one, it shows unpublished in red because we want to make very sure that you know if things are not the way they should be. Moderation is also pretty important. So you want to make sure that if you're running one of these that you're staying on top of moderation. Had I not just moderated this one, there would be a petitions in need of moderation banner on this page as well. That would remind you that there are petitions that need to be looked at. The other banner here is this abandoned petitions, which is a workflow that's specific for effort. So I want to talk about that as well. Abandoned petitions are basically petitions that have been left in a draft state for more than 2 hours. So it should take people about 5 minutes probably to launch a campaign. If it's been 2 hours, we assume that they are not potentially coming back to launch it. And so we will present this as an abandoned petition that admins can decide what should happen with. So you can see that there are 3 options here. You can basically go through this and say like, yeah, let's launch this campaign. It seems like a useful place to extend our effort. You can see information about the leader if we know who they are. If they haven't gotten to the sign in or sign up step, this would be blank. We know who this leader is. I couldn't be bothered to click the launch button apparently, so maybe I'm not going to be a very good leader. We'll remove me as leader of this campaign. And then we have information about the decision maker, so who was entered, their location, and you can choose whether to keep them published or unpublished. And you can basically click to process and then just go through any abandoned petitions to clear out ones that you want to send back to the moderation, or sorry, send back to recruitment, or to launch the ones that you want to include in the effort. And so this is something, like I said, it's only available for effort. So normally none of you know about the sort of unlaunched petitions that are created on the platform, the ones that are held in draft state for any amount of time. It's really only with efforts that we let you see those draft petitions and those unlaunched campaigns. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to mention. The other things to mention specifically with efforts is another thing that's a special feature for efforts, which is the ability to do bulk edits to these petitions. So let's say we launched this effort, we got a bunch of people creating petitions, and then we realized that we have a giant typo in our why details or something. And we're like, no, because there are 15 different petitions. We don't want to go petition by petition editing them. We should have double checked it, but we didn't. Luckily, you can bulk edit this. So you can come in and say, we don't actually need an exclamation point there. We're just going to have a period and make that edit. You can click to update. It'll update all of those petitions in the background so that you don't have to go petition by petition. Similarly, I mentioned bulk updating the admin status. So let's say that you did launch an effort, you created the petitions, but you do want to sort of hide it for now. By default, these are all good at the moment. I can say, actually, I want these to be approved so that they don't show up in public search results. So they're not on the campaign, the more petitions, petition category pages. This will update sort of in the background. I don't actually know if I hit yes. I think I did. Okay, so this will update in the background and the statuses will be updated as you go. This is also where you can lock or unlock fields. So like we have this field locked so no one can change it. Let's say you decide that you want people to be able to update this. You can also unlock it if needed.
Sorry, Christian, my question is like if you unlock it, so therefore let's imagine people have edited and you want to bulk edit something you cannot, obviously you can only bulk edit the ones that have not been updated by the leaders.
Yeah, so if you bulk edit, it'll set everything to whatever text here. So let's say you did allow it and now like things have gone crazy and you want to tame chaos and have all the things stay the same, you could edit from here. If you want to do some number of edits, but you want to leave the ones that have been customized as custom text, You could do the bulk edit via CSV, which would allow you to potentially like filter to find the ones that have not been changed, update only those, re-upload all of the text. So the ones that are already customized stay the way they are. Okay, and then the final thing that we sort of saw this, but I didn't specifically say it, so I'm going to specifically say it now, is that there are two different lookup pages for efforts. Normally you'll want to send people here, which is the efforts landing page. It is a little bit confusing. We do have a feature that's also called landing pages. Bad naming, it's our fault. We've regretted it ever since. However, the effort landing page is the one with the map. So this is the one where people can see an overview of the campaigns. They get this, how this works. This is also the route that they need to go through if they're going to become leaders of the campaign. So if you want to recruit leaders, they have to go through the landing page. The other option is this hub page, which basically just lists all of the petitions. This one is sort of boring looking because, well, there's like no signatures, but you could imagine sending this version of the page to like journalists if you're doing some sort of press release about this campaign. That would let them see that there are a bunch of campaigns being run. You can sort this so that the higher signature totals are on top if you wanted to. And it basically doesn't require them to go through the map and search for locations to get more information. They can just see all of the campaigns at once. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. Any questions on anything at all?
A lot.